It was supposed to be a quiet moment of grief, but it quickly turned into a scene of hostility. As the wealthy heir marched across the manicured cemetery lawn, his eyes locked on the black woman standing over his father's fresh grave. To him, she was nothing more than an intruder, a stranger who had no right to be in his family's private plot. He prepared to have her removed by force, blinded by his own prejudice. But he made a fatal mistake. He didn't look closely at the 3 infants she held in her arms. He didn't know that his next move would uncover a buried family secret so shocking it would bring a millionaire to his knees. Why was she really there? The answer changes everything.
The journey to the cemetery was a pilgrimage of sheer will. For the young mother, navigating the city's transit system with a triple stroller was a daily battle. But today, the weight of her burden felt heavier than usual. She wasn't dressed in the fine silks or tailored suits that usually walked the paths of the Oakwood Memorial Park. Her coat was worn, her shoes were practical, and the stroller she pushed was second-hand, squeaking softly with every rotation of its wheels. This wasn't just any graveyard. It was the final resting place of the city's elite, a place where silence cost millions. She knew she stuck out against the backdrop of marble angels and manicured hedges. She could feel the eyes of the groundskeepers lingering on her, questioning her presence in this sanctuary of wealth. But she moved with a specific, heartbreaking purpose. She wasn't there to beg or to vandalize. She was there to say goodbye to the only man who had ever promised to help her. She finally reached the plot, the most expansive and expensive in the entire park. The earth was still unsettled, covered by a mountain of expensive wreaths and ribbons left by business partners and politicians. She parked the stroller carefully, looking down at her 3 sleeping infants, then at the headstone of the powerful man who had just been buried. 100 yards away, the silence was broken by the slam of a heavy car door. The deceased man's son, a man who had inherited an empire along with a lifetime of suspicion, was watching. He didn't see a mother paying respects. From his vantage point, filtered through layers of prejudice and grief-stricken anger, he saw a threat. He adjusted his suit jacket, his jaw set tight, and began his long, aggressive stride across the grass. She had no idea that the shadows stretching over her belonged to a man intent on destroying her peace.
As the millionaire closed the distance between them, the atmosphere shifted from solemn mourning to volatile hostility. The woman looked up, her eyes red from crying, expecting perhaps a nod of shared grief or a moment of respectful silence. Instead, she was met with a wall of unadulterated rage. The man didn't see a grieving mother. Through the lens of his prejudice, he saw an opportunist. He saw a woman who didn't belong in this zip code, let alone at the private burial site of the city's most prominent industrialist. He didn't need to speak for his intentions to be clear. His body language screamed distinct commands. Leave, now. He gestured violently toward the cemetery gates, his hand cutting through the air like a blade. The woman froze, her hands gripping the handle of the triple stroller so tightly her knuckles turned white. She tried to gesture to the grave, to offer a silent explanation for her presence, but her plea was cut short. With a sneer of disgust, the man kicked the small, modest bouquet of wildflowers she had placed on the dirt. The cheap stems scattered across the manicured grass, a brutal insult to her offering. The cruelty of the act stunned her. The injustice burned hotter than the tears on her face. She was not there to steal. She was there to honor a bond that this angry man knew nothing about. But he wasn't interested in the truth. In his mind, she was a grifter, using the obituary as a map to harass wealthy families. He loomed over her, using his height and his expensive suit as weapons of intimidation, encroaching on her personal space until she was forced to step back, shielding her children with her own body. The tension ratcheted up another notch when the babies, disturbed by the commotion and the aggressive energy, began to cry. The sound seemed to snap something inside the millionaire. Instead of softening, his face hardened. He looked at the stroller with repulsion, viewing the infants not as children, but as props in a scam designed to elicit sympathy. He pulled out his phone, his fingers tapping furiously, his eyes never leaving hers. He was calling the police. Panic began to rise in the woman's chest. She knew the statistics. She knew that a black woman in a wealthy enclave, accused of trespassing by a powerful white man, would not be given the benefit of the doubt. She frantically tried to turn the stroller around to leave, to de-escalate the situation before men with badges and guns arrived. But the millionaire stepped in front of the wheels, blocking her path. He wasn't done. He wanted to humiliate her. He wanted to ensure she was banned from the premises forever. He reached out, his hand grasping the canopy of the stroller to pull it back, determined to expose what he thought was a fraud. He was seconds away from tearing the cover back, ready to berate her further, completely unaware that he was about to uncover the very thing that would shatter his world.
The sound of approaching sirens cut through the air, a wailing signal that the woman's time had run out. The millionaire felt a surge of triumphant vindication. He had the power, he had the law on his side, and he was about to expose this intruder for the fraud he believed her to be. With the flashing blue lights reflecting off the cemetery gates in the distance, he made his move. He didn't wait for the officers. He lunged forward, ignoring the mother's desperate outstretched hands, and violently yanked the sunshade of the stroller back. He expected to see empty blankets, or perhaps children too old for the stroller, confirming his theory of a sympathy scam. He was ready to shout, to point, to condemn. But the shout died in his throat. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Staring back at him were 3 infants, terrified by the sudden exposure. But it wasn't their fear that stopped his heart. It was their faces. Specifically, their eyes. They possessed a rare, piercing shade of steel gray, a genetic anomaly that had been the trademark of only one man, his late father. The resemblance was not just striking, it was biological proof stamped across 3 innocent faces. As the millionaire stood frozen, his breath caught in a painful gasp, the woman reached into the side pocket of the stroller. She didn't run, she didn't fight. With trembling hands, she pulled out a worn, leather-bound journal bearing his father's initials. She opened it to a marked page and thrust it toward him. There, taped to the paper, was a photograph of the stern, cold billionaire he had known, sitting in a modest living room, laughing softly while holding these exact 3 babies. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The police cruiser screeched to a halt on the path behind them, doors flying open, officers shouting commands. But the millionaire couldn't hear them. He was staring at the woman he had just called the police on, realizing she wasn't a stranger. She was family, and he had just declared war on his own blood.
The officers approached with hands hovering near their holsters, ready to escalate a situation based on the millionaire's frantic call. But the man raised a shaking hand, waving them off. He mumbled a retraction, claiming it was a misunderstanding, his voice devoid of the arrogance that had fueled him just moments before. As the patrol car pulled away, leaving them alone in the quiet of the graveyard, the dynamic had irrevocably changed. The millionaire looked from the journal to the infants, and finally to the woman. He realized then that his father had kept this family a secret not out of shame for them, but out of fear of him, fear of the very judgment and prejudice he had just displayed. He had looked at a black woman in a wealthy space and saw a trespasser. He had looked at a struggling mother and saw a scammer. His bias had blinded him to the truth so completely that he almost had his own siblings arrested. He offered to help, to open the estate, to make things right, financially. But as the woman took the journal back and turned the stroller around, It was clear that some things cannot be bought. She didn't want his money. She had come for closure, and he had given her trauma instead. She walked away with her head held high, leaving him standing alone among the marble statues and the weight of his inheritance. This story isn't just about a family secret. It is a mirror held up to society. It forces us to ask why our instinct is often to police rather than to protect, and to assume the worst based on appearance alone. How many connections are severed? How many truths are buried simply because we refuse to look past our own biases? The next time you see someone who you think doesn't belong, ask yourself, are you seeing the truth, or are you just seeing your own prejudice?